I have learned some super interesting things giving over 300 virtual presentations this year, including one that contradicts everything I thought I knew over 20 years of giving presentations. Let's dive in. Learn the technology inside and out. If you're using Zoom or Teams or whatever, know some basic troubleshooting skills. I can't share my screen. I don't know how to take my hand down. I'm not sure how to let this person join the meeting. The worst thing you can do is, oh shoot, sorry. Let me try this. Let me click here. Okay, anyone know how to share the screen? Can you come off mute? I don't even know how to get myself off mute. Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? You lose your audience so fast fumbling through the technology. The best thing you can do is to definitely maneuver through the technology to, one, prevent the problems from happening, and two, to fix them if they do happen. Be comfortable, be professional on top, but wear whatever you want or don't want underneath. I live in sweatpants all day, every day. Early on working remotely, I felt like I needed to dress in full workforce attire and it was so uncomfortable, so I quickly swapped over to sweats and have never gone back. This one is a critical tip that will help give you that leg up when presenting. Use digital post-it notes or even a Word document and move it all the way up to just below where your webcam is, and take notes of your presentation right there. It is very, very natural to take a minute to look around or drop your eye level just for a second when presenting. It doesn't look like you're actually reading notes. Be sure to not just read them verbatim, but use it as a guide to help you along your presentation. You do not need to stare directly into the camera constantly. When COVID first hit and people started working remotely, that was all the rage. Make sure you're making direct eye contact with your audience and just stare blankly into the camera. It is unnatural. Now that people are used to remote work, it is very okay to look around at your audience members as you're giving the presentation. But staring into the camera looks awkward and fake and unnatural now. How do you know if you should be more familiar and casual in your approach or more professional? Read the virtual room. Look at their faces if they have their cameras on and see how they're responding. Learn who's going to be in your presentation beforehand and then find that balance. But what you don't want to do is to turn them off by being a little too casual and loosey-goosey about things, or being too stiff and formal when you're giving your digital presentation. Never assume you are prepared for your virtual presentation. Know you are prepared. That means, do you have your notes prepared? Do you have your screen share ready? Do you have any browser tabs open that you'll need to share? Whatever you need to do, make certain you are prepared beforehand. I've learned this one the hard way too many times to count, but live virtual demos are a high risk, high reward type of scenario. They are risky. There are so many factors at play, especially if it's not fully baked, that could go wrong, but man, are they impressive if they go right. So consider the audience, consider the demo itself and what's at stake to see if it's worth trying a live demo. But if you do, be sure to have some sort of backup. If I'm doing a live product demo of a technology, I always have a backup slide deck of screenshots that walk the audience through my demo. Remote presentation audiences are far more forgiving than you might think. They are human too. They are people too. They have fumbled through presentations themselves, I'm sure. So be forgiving of yourself, and if you make a mistake, that's okay. If it's little, just keep going and ignore it. If it's a medium mistake, maybe say something like, "Excuse me," and then correct yourself and move on. If it's a bigger mistake where you said something that straight up isn't true or doesn't fit, you might say something like, "Excuse me, what I meant to say was," and then just move on. But don't let those virtual mistakes derail your entire presentation. This same principle applies to both in-person presentations and virtual. Do not practice your presentation delivery. Make sure you are fully prepared with all of the content and material and knowledge, but don't practice the delivery itself. The more you do, the more mechanical and robotic you will come across, and the less natural and authentic you will seem. Make sure you are in the right virtual room. Sometimes with virtual meetings, there can be multiple instances of the same meeting invite, so just make sure that you're in the right one before getting started, or else your actual audience might be thinking you skipped out on them entirely. This one depends entirely on your presentation audience. If they have their cameras on, be sure to gather live feedback from them. Are they listening and engaged and leaning forward and even smiling? Or are they slouched back, looking at their phones, looking around, or totally obviously multitasking? Read the room and see what you need to pivot during your presentation. On the side of your main presentation, have all of your supplemental materials you could possibly need for questions that arise pulled up and ready to go. There have been many times where I have not had that ready. A question comes up and I'm scrambling trying to look up something or find a document to pull it up in time. So make sure you're thinking through all the questions that could be asked and having it all ready to go. Even if you don't need it, that's okay. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Be transparent with your audience right at the very beginning of how you're going to handle questions. Should they chat throughout your presentation and post their questions in text form there, or should they wait to the end and come off mute and ask those questions verbally? Just let them know what you prefer. Here's a pro PowerPoint tip. Use the notes feature at the bottom of the slides. When you're in presentation mode in Teams or Zoom, they pull up really clearly and you can position them right under the camera, just like we talked about with the Post-it notes or the Word document, and you can see your notes as you're going throughout your presentation for each slide as it pops up for your audience. The most common mistake I see in virtual presentations is not being aware of whether you are sharing your screen or not. And I've seen some pretty embarrassing experiences when people don't realize it and people are like, you're still sharing your screen, maybe you should turn that off. Or, which happens all the time, you think you're sharing your screen and you're 30 seconds in, 2 minutes in, and someone's like, I think you should be sharing your screen, you're not. And then you fumble around and start over, and it's just a headache. So be very aware and check, consciously check, intentionally check on whether you're sharing your screen or not. While we all have interruptions occasionally when we're working from home, don't wear those interruptions as a badge of honor. I see sometimes people are like, oh, my kids are here, oh, climb up on my lap, and they do it constantly as if they're proud of that. Be professional and courteous of your audience and do what you can to minimize them. When they do happen, and they will, just roll with it and move on as best you can. It's been proven that the most effective means of communicating something is using a whiteboard. Early on, I super missed having whiteboards throughout the office. So I invested in this digital whiteboard where you just take the stylus and you glean all of the benefits of having a whiteboard, but virtually with your presentation audience. I'd super recommend using a whiteboard to convey conceptually the concepts that you're trying to teach. All right, here's the big one that contradicts 20 years of presenting in person that I'm still a little uncomfortable with myself. First, take just a second to like and subscribe to advance your career by learning more of these presentation tips. Virtual presentations can be more effective than in-person presentations. Let me explain why. You've got sidebar chat for the audience to engage with the presenter and other experts. You've got emojis for live interactive feedback from the audience. You can take live polls depending on the tool you're using to see what your audience thinks about a certain topic or what their level of skill set is. There are so many aspects of presenting remotely that are better than in person, and this was hard for me to accept. I love being in person and presenting in front of a live audience, but there are a lot of ways where virtual presentations are better and more effective. I know that is super controversial, but it has been my truth, my experience, having given over 300 virtual presentations this year. I know that's a lot for those of you just getting started off with presenting, especially virtually. Take a look at this video to help you strip out everything else and focus on what is most important when you're first getting started as a beginner.